We're now joined by our senior counsel for global affairs, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. By the way, he's going to be in the studio with us at the end of this week, which will be great. Looking forward to having you in here, Mike. You have a brand new piece up. The Biden administration must act on Christian persecution in Nigeria. Under your administration, and we were working on this with you, Nigeria was listed as a country of primary concern, CPC. The Biden administration takes it off. Meanwhile, we've got horrible cases of religious tyranny going on there, persecution in unbelievable ways. What's your sense of where we are on this right now?
Thanks for being such an important part of making religious freedom and the problems and the persecution of Christians in Nigeria top of what the ACLJ does. It was very helpful to me when I was Secretary of State to have the backs of folks like you, Jay. Look, they've gone backwards. We identified a factual observation that this is a country that we should be very concerned about its religious freedom. And the administration came in for reasons unknown and lifted that designation. And that makes an awful difference. It tells the leaders in that country that America is not watching anymore. And so we've seen it, right? 50 Nigerian Catholics killed while attending Mass this past week. Tragedies across the space. Fulani herdsmen terrorizing and extorting Christians there. It has become a more dangerous place, a less tolerant place, a place where people practicing their faith are being persecuted in ways that are far worse than they were during my time in office. I regret we've gone backwards. We've taken this step back away from exerting what America's influence can be for protecting humanity and religious freedom around the world.
Mr. Secretary, C.C. Howell, our senior counsel, is here, who does a lot of our international work. And on this issue in Nigeria, we've been involved in for a long time. We were stunned when this administration made that change. And we've represented clients in these countries. This is a very difficult situation down there.
So you have Nigeria, where Christians killed for their faith every 2 hours, where more Christians were killed this past year in Nigeria than any other country. And all the Christian deaths worldwide, 80% of them occur in Nigeria. And why this country is not on the CPC list is ridiculous.
Okay, so, Mike, that's a question I want to ask you. Why did they take it off?
It's so difficult to know. I can't find a good reason for having taken them off as a factual matter or a moral matter. I will say for a long time, the State Department walked away from this issue. They wanted to treat this as an intertribal fight that was disconnected from faith. You've seen this for many, many years at the State Department. They'd rather characterize it as just can't we all get along than deeply intolerant, deeply, in the case of Israel, anti-Semitic here, anti-Christian activity being prosecuted because of people's use of their own faith. Because people stepped forward and said, I am a Jew, I'm a Christian. That's what's going on here. I think inside the State Department, they'd rather avert their gaze from that, and that's much to America's shame.
So you brought up Israel. I want to jump to this for a moment because I was there, you were there. Andy Economo, my colleague here, was there when the embassy in Jerusalem was opened up. It was a historic day. The left was screaming, this is going to bring war. It's going to bring disaster. The Middle East is going to explode. Meanwhile, we had more peace accords. If you put Camp David and Oslo together, they didn't equal the Abraham Accords. So you had all of this. So I go back to this question, Mr. Secretary, and that is, why in the world, in that situation then, would you put in place another, they're talking about rolling back the embassy recognition, and they're also opening up now a consulate, which you all had closed, for, quote, Palestinian affairs, because the embassy should handle all Israelis' affairs. Why are they doing that, and how bad of a move is that?
It's a tragic move. It's a dangerous move. I happen to think it's an illegal move under the 1995 law. But more importantly, we don't have consulates and embassies in the same city anywhere else in the world. The the United States ambassador to Israel, can manage the affairs of all Israeli people, including those that are living in the Judea and Samaria, close to other parts of Israel. There's no doubt that set of issues can be managed by the embassy itself. They're moving back because this is the traditional left-wing policy of failing to acknowledge that the challenge here is the Palestinians and not the Israelis, and some moral equivocation between the two. It's a really dangerous move. War did not break out when we moved that embassy.
Nope.
War did not break out when we withdrew from the JCPOA. War didn't break out when we struck Qasem Soleimani. When America does the right thing to protect its own citizens and to recognize the fundamental realities that Israel is the rightful homeland of the Jewish people. When we get that right, Jay, good things flow from that. To go back and put a consulate there that says, no, somehow we're going to deal independently with the Palestinians apart from the rightful holders of that real estate, the Israeli nation and the Jewish people, that is really dangerous for the United States of America.
You know, Andy, you and I walked by the old Palestinian affairs, what was the consulate. And what's interesting to us is we were also at the event. We've done a lot of work in Israel, and it's like this administration doesn't understand that with Israel, you got to think with Middle East generally, nine-dimensionally.
Well, that's right. I wanted to ask the Secretary Pompeo, what sort of signal does this send the world when you've got an embassy and a consulate in the same city,
within a mile of each other,
within striking distance, walking, I should say, distance, and you're bifurcating the work of the United States with respect to Israel on one hand and Palestinians on the other. What sort of signal does that send to the world about how America feels about Israel?
Yes, Andy, it's the very message that I think, frankly, the leadership of the United States has been sending since they took office back in January 2021. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of the nation of Israel and its importance to the United States of America, and in fact to people of every Abrahamic faith, Muslims, Christians, Jews alike. You're right, a couple hundred yards apart to establish a consulate somehow signals that this is an independent nation, wholly apart from Israel. And I was there just a couple weeks ago. I was in Judea and Samaria. I traveled from Nazareth down to Beersheba, to Shiloh, to Hebron. Those are places that are inside of Israel, and to have a consulate that is separate from your embassy sitting inside of Jerusalem is a tragic signal to the world, and it will discourage others from making peace with Israel rather than promote peace and stability in the region.
All right, last question, and it's one I'm sure we're going to talk about more when we see you this week, and that is the economy. I mean, the January 6 hearings, our day two are going on. Meanwhile, the stock market's down 665 points, 1,500 points in the last 2 days, and gas is almost $6 a gallon here. It's much more in the West and in other major cities, and parents can't find baby formula. Failed policies. You know, I say elections have consequences, Mike. This is exactly what happens when you have an election with consequences.
This is evidence. If anybody needs to view just the transition that's taken place and how we think about the American people and American families, and how the United States government, when it sets policy, it drives outcomes. We are living that nightmare today. Food is expensive. I was with a group of folks last week whose kids played on a travel soccer team. Half the games have been canceled because they can't afford to drive to the away games for their kids. These are intentional. These are intentional policies. This didn't happen randomly. This isn't Putin's inflation. This is President Biden inflation.
100% correct, Mike. Thanks for being with us. Look forward to seeing you this week. Folks, your support of the ACLJ allows us to have experts like Mike Pompeo as part of our team, Senior Counsel for Global Affairs, former Secretary of State. We encourage you to support the work of the ACLJ, aclj.org.